Hello, this is Michel Leviathan Sorbet and you are watching a new episode on the Wojennik TV YouTube channel. Today it is review time, but I won't be showing you a new game, a standalone game. I will be showing you and reviewing an expansion, or rather 5 expansions during the same movie. I will be talking about expansions which expand the world created in 1500, the New World by Dan Verssen Games, a game published in 2018. Those 5 expansions, France, England, Netherlands, Spain and Portugal, all add additional cards associated to those 5 nations. 1500 The New World was a game that I have already reviewed on our channel, and at that moment I said that this game is meant to be a game about colonization, about struggle for the supremacy in the New World. But in reality, this was a very chaotic game, a game in which the situation on the map board changed absolutely diametrically from one turn to another, a game in which this colonial aspect, in which this rivalry between the empires was a theme that the game really wanted to have in it, but in fact it was rather absent. It was so chaotic, it was so abstract that this colonization and this colonization aspect and this rivalry between the powers engaged in the game was something rather absent from the game itself. But here we have the expansions. So those expansions which add the 5 major powers of the world at the beginning of the 16th century maybe will change this state, and maybe they will include some additional chrome, some additional depth. This is one of the answers which I would like to give you today during this review. First of all, I would like, as always, show you the components enclosed in the boxes of the expansions for 1500 The New World. As I said, the game was published by Dan Verssen Games in 2018, both the core game and the expansions. Now, let's start our journey by taking a look at what is enclosed in those 5 boxes. Here is 1500 The New World with all its expansions. Those expansions are enclosed in boxes. Those are card expansions, so in those boxes we will find cards and a very short rulebook. How do they look? Let's take a brief look at what is enclosed in the Netherlands expansion set. Now we find 2 decks of cards in each of those boxes. The first one will be the nation cards with, as you can see, the same card cover as the book, as the expansion cover. Those cards are a mix of the cards which can be found in the basic game, so in the among the base cards, but apart from that we receive also nation specific cards. For instance, here we have the Dutch Antilles. So each nation, for instance the Dutch, the English, the Portuguese, the Spanish and the French will receive their own set of unique cards, and that's neat. That's a fine thing, that's a great idea, because thanks to it, each deck will be different. 2 things will differentiate those decks. First of all, those nation cards, unique to each nation, and secondly, a unique mix of additional cards which were transferred to this expansion from the base game. Dutch Antilles is not the only specific Dutch card. Here we have, for instance, late arrival. And let's take a look here. It's, for instance, appropriation. So each nation will have their own cards. That's an interesting idea, and this makes each and every nation deck different from the others. But that's not all, because in each expansion we will also find a second deck of cards with a different cover, and those will be the AI decks. So here we receive an artificial intelligence with an engine which will enable us to play solo or against the artificial intelligence deck. Each deck will also be constructed of a certain number of cards which were enclosed in the base edition, but with some subtle differences because those cards can work in a different way than in the base game. So even if we know a card from the base deck, as you can see, it has the same name but it works differently. For instance, in the base game, the colonists build or reduce a total of 3 different colonies, whereas in the AI deck, the card will not only remove up to 3 colonies, then it will build up to 3 colonies, and there's also a prerequisite: it has to change minimum 2 of those colonies in order to take place. So those two cards have the same picture, the same name, but they work differently, and the way they will work depends on the fact if they come from the base deck or from the AI deck. Among those cards, we will find also nation-related cards. So, for instance, appropriation, late arrival. Those will be the same cards which are included in the nation deck, which can be used by players. Because the basic difference between those two decks is that the following one, so the AI deck, will be used while playing against the nation. It will be a deck associated to the artificial intelligence opponent, while the second deck can be used by a human player in order to play as a nation. So that's a neat addition, because we now can play as France, as Spain, as one of the major powers of the early 1500s. If we like the Dutch, not a problem, we can just grab the Dutch deck and start playing. If we want to play solo, for instance, against the English and the French, we can not only grab our Dutch deck and play against the opponents, we can also play with the base deck against the artificial intelligence decks. It is even possible to play a game in which we will only have artificial intelligence decks, just to see how it works. Now, I won't be opening all the expansions in order to show the cards. They are just different when it comes to each nation. What I wanted also to show is the rules included in each expansion. Now, those rules are really pretty straightforward. They are, as you can see, written on a sheet of paper. We just have a few of them. First of all, we have a description of the cards, so what is enclosed in each box. Secondly, how we use the nation decks, and then how we also play against the AI opponent. Finally, a nice addition, an example of an AI turn, which is really nicely written with some examples, which shows us how to exactly play the game. So after reading this, you should have absolutely no doubts how to use those decks. Now, I would like to show you how a sampler turn looks like in order to show you the mechanisms which the AI uses during gameplay. Now, first of all, the AI player will always play last during a turn, so this will enable him to react to what we have done during our own turn. If we do have more than one AI in the game, the order in which those AIs will play their turn is randomly determined during the game. During the draw card step, we draw normally a number of cards from the AI deck equal to the royal support. So in this case, at the beginning of the game, we will draw 4 cards from the AI deck, and we will place them face down next to the playing board, or where we just want to stock those cards. Now, looking at those cards, we will be searching for cards which have the information start at their bottom, because this is a new type of cards added in this expansion, and some of the AI cards have this information. Those cards will be played by the AI at the beginning of a turn. And when playing the beginning of a turn, we will return those cards face up, and then we will play them from left to right. So first of all, we will play the embargo, which will forbid us to adjust the royal support of the AI during the current turn. Then we will play the Marauders cards, which will forbid us to gain points for monopolies. So those are two things which can be played at the start of the turn. Then, when all such cards have been played, the players take their turn. After all players had played their turn, we play the turn of the AI. The AI will, during his turn, also proceed in the same way. So we will return those cards face up and we will play them left to right. A number of cards has a certain prerequisite, which says, for instance, as when it comes to the colonists, that in order to play this card, we have to get a minimum of 2 changes. So if the card says remove up to 3 colonies, then build up to 3 colonies, and the minimum is 2. If there are no 2 colonies on the board to be removed, the card won't be played at this time. If a card is omitted, we go to the next one to the right, and so on. Then, after playing all cards, we return to the left to the unplayed cards in order to verify if the situation on the board changed and if the prerequisite of such a card is met. If so, the card is played. If not, the card is played for its royal support. In this case, the colonists would not change the royal support, so we would also ignore it. So each card which can change the royal support will be played to the point of reducing the royal support of a player to 0 or increasing the royal support of the AI to the maximum. If such a card cannot change the royal support of, or if the royal support of the AI is already at its maximum, or the royal support of the player is already at its minimum, the card will be played to place a colony on the board. The placing of this colony will be determined by the player, who just should choose the best position for the AI player. After doing so, after playing each and every card of his hand, the AI scores points normally, both for the number of colonies on the board and then for its monopolies. At the beginning of an AI turn, the AI loses points normally for struggling colonies and then removes all of them from the board. And that's pretty it. So those rules are really very straightforward. The way that the AI will interact with the players is related to the cards which the AI draws. At the beginning, the number of cards is not big, so with 4 cards the AI won't be doing much. But then when the AI's royal support increases and the number of cards drawn is bigger, the number of moves that an AI can do, or the number of the harm that an AI can do to players, increases significantly. The game ends normally at the end of the final turn, where the points are finally tallied, and we verify who managed to score the biggest number of points. And the game ends without any special rules concerning scoring. That's it when it comes to the rules governing solo play or play with more than one player, but using AI decks. Now let's pass on to a conclusion. I would like to give my thoughts about this game, about those expansions, and about what I think about solo playing 500 The New World. At the beginning of this video, I have already told you that at the end, I would like to answer a very important question. Are those expansions a thing which adds additional depth and increases the climate in the basic game of 1500 The New World. And at this point, the answer should be, unfortunately, no. At the beginning, I would like to give my opinion about the strong points of those expansions, though, in order to tell you in a few words what I really like in those expansions, because there are some strong points which should and deserve to be underlined. First of all, I really enjoyed the fact that we received 5 different expansions, and secondly, that all those expansions are different one from another. All of them work pretty much the same, so you receive the same set of rules governing both solo play and playing with nation decks, but all of those decks are composed differently. We find different cards in them, and this is a very good thing. Thanks to it, while playing with the Dutch, the Portuguese, the French, or the basic game, you will always get a different type of deck to play, and this is something that is really a good thing. The second thing is that I really like that you receive the solo rules. So those rules are really written in a very easy to understand and to implement way. I do not like solo modes or solo games where you have to spend a lot of time in order to play an AI's turn. Some games have really long solo rules, and to be clear, I do not have any problem with long rule books. I do not have any problem with AIs of great complexity. I have a problem with games which impose a lot of rules and of rules which are difficult to implement during gameplay to govern the AI moves. Here it's not the problem, because as you might have seen, the rules are really short, very straightforward, and thanks to it, gameplay is really fast. There is absolutely no downtime. What I like is the fact that you can suit the number tailor the number of artificial intelligence opponents to your own needs. So you can play against one opponent, which is an AI deck, against 2 AI decks, or even you can play with a human opponent against 1 or 2 or several AI decks. That's something worth mentioning, because in the majority of cases, in most games, you either play against a human or against an artificial intelligence adversary. Here you can have a mix. So if you want to play a 4-player game, you can play both against three artificial intelligence decks, and you can also invite a friend to play a game against 2 bots. So it's a nice addition, it's a nice thing to have, because as I said, in most games you will play solo against artificial intelligence, or you will play against a human adversary. Here you can have a mix of different types. And those are, in my opinion, the strong points of those expansions. So what are the weaker points? The first one, which I have already given you at the beginning of this conclusion, is the fact that those expansions do not add any additional climate or depth to the base game. One of the major weaknesses of this game, of the core game, was the fact that it was a game meant to be about the colonial empires, about the struggle between the major European powers at the beginning of the 16th century. But in reality, this game is very, very abstract, and this subject, this theme, is totally absent from the game. You have the game map on which you have Central, Northern, Southern America. You have cards with pretty pictures representing Indians, ships, soldiers, etc. But you do not feel this theme. It's just absent from the game. And unfortunately, the expansions do not change it at all. I had great expectations, because I love games in which you build your own empire, in which you can expand your empire. I am a big fan of 4X games, but this game is not one of them. You receive nation expansions. So you could expect while opening those expansions and playing your games that you will feel playing like the Portuguese or the Dutch. But in reality, you won't feel it absolutely. You won't feel it. You won't feel it at all. That's not a great thing. The second thing is that the game is still very chaotic. It was chaotic using the core cards, the core box. Here it's just the same. Adding additional cards which construct the nations decks or the AI solo decks doesn't change this chaotic experience. It's still all up to the cards that you receive during your turn. So you won't be, as I said, expanding your empire. You will be just focusing on your current turn. You will try to maximize your effort and your victory point gain. You will not have any strategical decisions to take. You will just maximize your points at your very turn. You will not look at what other players are planning to do. You will just look at your cards and play them all in order to grab the maximum number of points. And the expansions do not change anything in this gameplay. It will still be just playing cards, maximizing points, ending your turn, drawing cards, etc. and finishing the game. The final scores will sometimes or even often depend on the cards that you draw, because if you happen to draw 5 good cards, you'll get 15 points. Hooray, that's great. On other turns, you will grab 5 reaction cards or 2 reaction cards and 3 useless cards because, for instance, the opponents have absolutely anything left on the board, and you will gain 3 points or 4 points. It doesn't appeal to me, because I like games in which I can plan, in which I can come back to the game, but thanks to my play, not because I received such cards. And in my opinion, the expansions do not change the same chaotic feeling from the basic game. The third thing is that the solo mode, while interesting to implement, while very easy to play, sometimes will, or even often, will also be very chaotic, and sometimes the AI will just will just make dumb moves. It will sometimes build just one colony somewhere on the board. It will remove the colonies of the player who has the most number of points, but he has already taken his turn, for instance, or he will remove the colonies of a player which has a monopoly somewhere. So, in my opinion, this mode is as much chaotic as the base game. Having said that, I believe that those expansions are things that only special geeks should acquire, those who really like 1500 The New World for some reason, people who want to play with nation cards, with nation decks, people who want to play this game solo. If you're not a fan of the core game, I would say just leave it, just try to find another game which will treat this subject in a different manner, because this is not a game covering a subject totally absent from the current gaming possibilities. You have many games which will cover the same subject in my opinion, a better way. This was a review of the expansions for 1500 The New World from Dan Verssen Games. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe our channel. Take also a look at our other reviews, and I hope you will have a great day and you will revisit us in some time. See you.